Beverly requested a granny square tutorial using my method, which reduces the gap size in between clusters, and she requested that I do it in a solid color. So go ahead and grab your yarn and let's jump into the tutorial. Begin by chaining 4 and then slip stitch into the first chain to form a circle. You can also make a magic ring if you prefer that method. Chain 3, that's considered a double crochet, and then work 2 double crochet into your circle. This makes your first granny cluster. Now chain 2 and work 3 double crochets into your circle to make your second granny cluster. Chain 2 and repeat that 2 more times. A granny cluster, chain 2, a granny cluster, chain 2. Once you've made all 4 sets of a granny cluster and a chain 2, slip stitch into the top of your starting chain 3 to close the round. If you were changing colors each round, this is where you would go ahead and cut off your yarn and then reattach the new color in any of your corner spaces. Because for this tutorial, we'll only be using one color and we still want to start our next round in our corner space, we're going to slip stitch into the top of our next stitch and then slip stitch into our corner space. And now we can begin our next round in the corner. Begin round 2 by making a chain 3. This is considered a double crochet, and then work 2 more double crochet into your chain 2 space. This is going to make your first granny cluster of the round. Now chain 2 and work a granny cluster into that same chain 2 space. In a traditional granny square, you do not work into any of the stitches from the previous round. You only work into the gaps in between clusters. So we're going to skip over these 3 double crochets and work in the next chain 2 space. We're going to work a corner into that space. So we're going to work a granny cluster. Chain 2. And work another granny cluster into that same chain 2 space. Repeat that in the next 2 corners. Again, that's a granny cluster, which is 3 double crochets, a chain 2, and another granny cluster in each of these 2 spaces. Once you've worked all 4 corners, slip stitch into the top of your starting chain 3 to close. To start round 3 and all other rounds, you do want to start in the corner again. So because we slip stitch into this space over here, we're going to repeat slip stitching into the top of our next stitch and slip stitching into our corner so we can begin the round there. Chain 3 and work 2 double crochets into your chain 2 space. This is considered your first granny cluster. Now chain 2 and work another granny cluster into that same chain 2 space. In our previous round, we only had corner spaces to work into. Starting in round 3, you will also have spaces along the side that you'll need to work into in between your clusters. You'll work in those clusters by simply making a granny cluster. A traditional granny square normally requires a chain 1 in between clusters. Personally, I do not do that. I like the gaps in my granny squares to be a little closer together. So I skip the chain 1 spaces and just work a cluster into those spaces along the side. Now, because I'm only on round 3, I only have one cluster to work along the side, but that will increase per round that you make. So in this granny square, I've made 5 rounds. So if I were to work a sixth round, then I would have 1, 2, 3, 4 clusters to make along the side. So just keep in mind, even though I only have one cluster to work in round 3, then as your project grows and you add more rounds, the number of clusters you need to make along the side will increase as well. And once you've worked all clusters along the sides, go ahead and make your corner, and you'll do that by working a granny cluster. Chain 2, and work another granny cluster in that same chain 2 space. And then continue to repeat this around, working a granny cluster in each space in between clusters in the previous round, and working a granny cluster, chain 2, and a granny cluster in each corner space until you've completed your entire round. Once you've worked a granny cluster into each space along the side and a granny cluster, chain 2, granny cluster in each corner, then slip stitch into the top of your starting chain 3 to close the round. Continue to repeat round 3 until your project has reached your desired size. And if you prefer to change colors each round, then check out my last tutorial for instructions on doing that.